I've been thinking about doing this video for a while, but kept putting it off. And I think it's about time to do it. Kind of ties in with PEX 2A America's video, and they want to take your guns. I'm going to apologize now. This may be a bit of a lengthy video. But I want to try to kind of cover. Got some documentation I've printed off. It's going to be different than what PEC did, but I would say kind of along the same lines. The bump stock ban. Kind of what this is based on here. The bump stock ban, they decided to ban the bump stock because they decide it now is the same thing as a fully automatic weapon. It is not a fully automatic weapon. Watched a video the other day. A lawyer has a channel, strong 2A supporter. A fully automatic is one trigger pull, or one function of the trigger. You pull the trigger, that's one function. So it's one, pop, 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 pop. Release it and it stops. If it's one, boom, two, release, three, pull, boom. So therefore it takes three functions of the trigger to fire the gun. It is now a semi-automatic. Doesn't matter how fast you do that. And there are people out there that can fire with just their finger pulling the trigger faster than a binary trigger or bump stock can. So, in my opinion, they have no ground to stand on. I know Gun Owners of America has filed a lawsuit, and they seem to think they'll win. Let's hope they do. I'm going to go back a little bit. Let's think about back in the mid to late 30s, into the 40s, 1900s. Well, let's just start right here. September 1st, 1939 to be exact. The German army under Adolf Hitler launched an invasion of Poland that triggered the start of World War II. There's a lot of controversy. They say citizens weren't armed, and they weren't, so therefore they weren't able to fight back. And been hearing this since before I was in junior high, maybe about junior high when we started covering world history. I'm going to start with this. I wish I would have remembered to save the link. I would have put it in the bottom of it. But in this one is, I got points highlighted that I want to bring up, but I'm not going to cover it all. It is from Wikipedia, so therefore you know it is probably liberal controlled, but it does have some points I want to bring up. And this one here, I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but I brought up a video while I was going over this on the website. It brought up a map and then it said to click on a video. I am going to post a link to that video down in the comments section at the bottom. I highly encourage anybody to click on it and watch that video. It is interesting. It's about the Revolutionary War. But back on track here. September 1st, 1939, the German army under Adolf Hitler launched an invasion of Poland that triggered the start of World War II. Though by 1939, Japan and China were already at war. It was a separate thing. It just got to be bigger. The battle for Poland only lasted about a month before a Nazi victory. But the invasion plunged the world into a war that would continue for almost 6 years and claim the lives of tens of millions of people. Today, 75 years later, Hitler is regarded as one of history's great villains. So it's easy to forget how slowly and reluctantly, the world's most powerful democracies mobilized to stop him. France and Britain did declare war on Germany 2 days after the invasion of Poland, but it would take them another 8 months before they engaged in full-scale war with the Nazis. The United States would join the war against Hitler. The United States wouldn't join the war against Hitler until December 1941, a full 2 years after the war began. And if you're a patriot, if you're an American, you know that we did not enter the war because of Nazi Germany. We entered the war because of Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. But let's think about this a minute. 8 months after they declared war, before they engaged in full-scale conflict. We can tie this in with our gun rights being taken. They take a little bit, they get stronger, we get weaker. They take a little bit more, we get weaker, they get stronger yet. The longer we stand by and let them take, it's going to put us in a position of we're not able to do anything about it. I got highlighted here, the United States wouldn't join the war against Hitler until December 19. Okay, that section of the Britain and France waiting 8 months, and we waited 10 years. I've got that all highlighted, and then back here on page 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Tell you the highlighted section, page 1 and 2. Okay. The British and French had both promised to declare war on Germany in the event of an invasion of Poland. But after Munich, Hitler doubted that Chamberlain had the stomach to go to war in defense of Poland. He was wrong. Chamberlain was furious that Hitler had broken his Munich promise to seek no more territorial gains beyond Czechoslovakia. On September 3rd, both France and Britain kept their promise and declared war on Germany. But while both countries could declare war, neither was really prepared to wage it. They had begun mobilization a few months earlier to prepare for possible German aggression, but the two countries still felt a few more months of military buildup would put them in a stronger position to fight the Nazis. Well, waiting only gave Hitler more time to advance his agenda farther. If you know anything about world history, Hitler did not stop at Poland. He went on to France and beyond, and he planned on Russia. He wanted to control Europe, period. He wanted to be the supreme controller there. The invasion of Poland occurred almost exactly 25 years after the start of World War I in August 1914. The war ended in Germany's defeat, and in 1919 the victorious Allies carved up territory that had been part of Germany. Austria-Hungary, Germany's defeated ally, and Russia, which had fallen to the Bolsheviks, into an array of new countries. Don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. I'm not going to get up to zoom in. Got a map here, and it shows pre-World War I Europe, and then has an outline of the way it was carved up after World War I. That map I just pointed at. The map shows how World War I reshaped Europe. The red lines show the new borders drawn by victorious allies at the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. One of the new countries was Poland, which before 1919 had last existed. Let me start over here. One of the new countries was Poland, which before 1919 had last existed as an independent nation in 1795. Another was Czechoslovakia. Its awkward name reflects the Allied decision to combine areas dominated by two different ethnic groups, Czechs and Slovaks, into a single nation. Hitler was contemptuous of these new nations. But I'm going to go on to my highlighted. How effective was the Polish resistance? Not very. And this is going to get into, now I'm getting into why I think the bump stocks being banned is part of the government plan. We all know that they're eventually going to go after semi-automatics in general. Doesn't remember. It doesn't care if it's a Mossberg 22 Plankster or a 1022. If it's a semi-auto, they don't want a citizen to have it. And we're going to cover this. This is going to cover that a little bit. Poland was determined to resist Germany's invasion, and on paper it had a decent shot at doing so. Poland had 1.3 million troops against Germany's 1.5 million, and Polish troops were highly motivated. Now when you're talking numbers in a military conflict, 1.3 million against 1.5 million. Fairly evenly odd there, depending on how those troops are used. But the Polish military was no match for Hitler's war machine. While Poland and Germany deployed similar numbers of men, Germany's troops were, one, much better supplied. According to historian Max Hastings, Germany had 3,600 armored vehicles against 750 in Poland. Quite a difference there. Germany had twice as many airplanes as Poland did, and its planes were more advanced. So not only were there more planes, they were more advanced. So that's like taking your bolt action 22 and putting it up against maybe even a bolt action 30-06 or a semi-auto 5.56 or 223, or let's say you got a 30-06 bolt action or even a single shot. Okay, what do you think that's going to do against a Barrett semi-automatic 50 BMG? There's no contest. So Poland found itself overmatched, and because of the German army in 1939, I'm going to start all over there. I am just tongue-tied today. I'm just aggravated. So Poland found itself overmatched, and because the German army in 1939 was a lot more mechanized than it had been in previous wars, the Germans were able to make progress extremely quickly. A little over a week after the start of combat, German troops had reached the outskirts of the Polish capital, Warsaw. It fell on September 29th. The Polish situation became even grimmer on September 17th when Russian troops began pouring across the border from the east. Another entity entering with Germans against Poland. wonder if that'd be anything like the American government taking our Second Amendment or any other rights, coming in from this side doing that, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Here comes the UN. My opinion, this whole video is going to be my opinion. The Polish army had already been at a disadvantage, but when the Soviets attacked, the Polish situation became hopeless. German and Russian troops secured full control over Poland by October 6, 1939. How did the Allies respond to the invasion? And I covered that about British and French troops or governments. It took 8 months. The United States, 2 years. So sitting back waiting and just letting the aggressor gain ground, gain advantage, isn't not helping the matter. The Nazi gun control argument. I started this video, talked about, it was said that the citizens being unarmed greatly helped Hitler complete what he had his intentions of doing. The Nazi gun control argument is a hypothesis which claims that gun regulations in the Third Reich rendered victims of the Holocaust weaker to such an extent that they could have more effectively resisted oppression if they had been armed or better armed. Okay, I got this one highlighted in a different color for a reason. Various mainstream sources. Okay, mainstream sources. So we pretty well know that mainstream sources are liberal controlled. Liberalism is just another word for communism. Various mainstream sources describe the argument as historically dubious, questionable, preposterous, tendentious, and problematic. Background and formation. Few German citizens owned or were entitled to own firearms in Germany in the 1930s. The Weimar Republic had strict gun control laws. While the Third Reich gained power, some aspects of gun regulation were loosened, such as allowing ownership for Nazi Party members and the military. Imagine that. If you're a member of their political party, you can own a firearm, or if you're in the military. But if you're not in the military, if you don't follow their political ways, then forget it. The laws were tightened in other ways. Nazi laws disarmed unreliable persons. Sound familiar? Disarmed unreliable persons. Red flag laws, especially Jews, but relaxed restrictions for ordinary German citizens. The policies were later expanded to include the confiscation of arms in occupied countries. Oh yeah. People you're trying to control, you don't want them to be armed. Which, that's what our Second Amendment's for, people. Our forefathers wrote the Second Amendment, in my opinion, full well knowing that there would be a time that the government needed to be held accountable. They needed to be put in their place. They would try to take too much control, too much power. According to gun rights activist Neil Knox, the Nazi gun control hypothesis was first suggested by J. Simkin and Jews for the Preservation of Firearm Ownership founder Aaron S. Zalman in a book they published in 1992. In it, they compared the German gun laws of 1928 and 1938 and the U.S. congressional hearings of what became, get this, the Gun Control Act of 1968. So, yeah, the Gun Gun Control Act of 1968 has founding with some of Hitler's doings. In a 2000 article, author and attorney Stephen S-T-E-P-H-E-N Hellbrook said he was presenting the first scholarly analysis of the use of gun control laws and policies to establish the Hitler regime and to render political opponents and especially German Jews defenseless. In the article, he cites an Adolf Hitler quote. And this is a quote from Adolf Hitler. The most foolish mistake we could possibly make would be allow the subject races to possess arms. What's he mean by subject races? The ones he wants to take over, control, and possibly annihilate. What's the government doing to us? They are slowly disarming us. Legal scholar and historian Robert Cottrell, C-O-T-T-R-O-L, cites another authoritarian regimes such as the Khmer Rouge and proposes they could have been inhibited by more private gun ownership. In the Los Angeles Times, he wrote, "Could the overstretched Nazi war machine have murdered 11 million armed and resisting Europeans while also taking on the Soviet and Anglo-American armies? Could 50 to 70,000 Khmer Rouge could have butchered 2 to 3 million armed Cambodians?" These questions bear repeating. The answers are by no means clear, but it is inconceivable they are not being asked. I think it's very clear. If they would have been armed, you know what, they might have lost. But there would have been a whole lot more thought in before doing it. They would have thought twice about it. They would have been able to defend themselves. At least they would have been able to take out the aggressor. In October 2015, U.S. Republican presidential primaries candidate Ben Carson didn't even know he was a candidate, but it says Republican presidential primary candidate Ben Carson said that Hitler's mass murder of Jews would have been greatly diminished if Germans had not been disarmed by the Nazis. I gotta agree with that. Reaction and opposition. In 2011 magazine piece, law professor Mark Nicholas, N-U-C-K-L-O-O-L-S, says Nazi gun control hypotheses are part of a shaky intellectual edifice, underlying belief in widespread gun ownership as a defense against tyrannical government. I'm going to start that over. In a 2011 magazine piece, law professor Mark Nicholas says Nazi gun control hypotheses are part of a shaky intellectual edifice, underlying belief in widespread gun ownership as a defense against tyrannical government. He says the idea is gaining traction with members of Congress as well as fringe conspiracy theorists. I read that and I'm thinking, okay, if it's gaining traction with members of Congress, so they are saying, hey, our citizens are armed, they can't defend themselves, they can't stand up for their constitutional rights. In his 2011 book, fellow law professor Adam Winkler says, this radical wing of the gun rights movement focuses less on the value of guns for self-defense against criminals than on their value for fighting tyranny. He says the militia groups that grew in number across the U.S. after the early 1990s organized to fight off what they saw as an increasingly tyrannical federal government and what they imagined was the inevitable invasion of the United States by the United Nations. Whew. Did I just not mention the United Nations earlier? Winkler wrote that some on the fringe, the Brady Bill was proof that the government was determined to deprive Americans of their constitutional rights. Regarding the Nazi gun control theory, anthropologist. What the heck is an anthropologist writing a book about gun control for? But anthropologist Abigail Kuhn, K-O-H-N, wrote in her 2004 book, such contrafactual arguments are problematic because they reinvent the past to imagine a possible future. No, don't reinvent the past. We study the past so it isn't repeated. In fact, Jews were not well armed and were not able to adequately defend themselves against Nazi aggression. Thus, reimagining a past in which they were and did does not provide a legitimate basis for arguments about what might have followed. I gotta disagree with that. That's like saying I would have no idea how to word that, but it would have made a big difference if they were armed. If Poland had the resources that Germany had, would have been one heck of a difference. I'm going to skip this section here. The view that had Jews in Germany been armed, they could have stopped the Holocaust, not only has little support among legal scholars and historians, it also has little support among human rights activists like Richard Lutz, who wrote, "It is a farcical, F-A-R-C-I-C-A-L, for gun rights activists to assert that Jewish civilians could have stopped the Holocaust if only they had ready access to firearms, as they only constituted a tiny, disorganized minority in areas under Nazi control. Though some able-bodied Jews would undoubtedly have been able to put up more resistance, as in the case of the Belaski partisans." Okay, let's go back. Where did I see that at? Constituted a tiny, disorganized minority. Does anybody have any idea what the numbers were during the Revolutionary War? I would almost guarantee the British forces far outnumbered the Americans. Move on to my next section here. This is something of big controversy, and again, this is going to be my opinion. Let's see if I can find where I had that highlighted. Now let's just start here. We all know about the United Nations. In my opinion, the United Nations ain't nothing but a big farce. They want to be able to tell us when to jump, we ask them how high. They want to be able to tell us when to go take a crap, we ask them what color it should be. Back when I was in junior high, maybe even before junior high, there was talk about one world government. Here's an article from LifeSite, Opinion Politics World, published Monday, November 5th, 2018, at 12:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The United Nations wants a one-world government in less than 12 years. Go back in time here. Like I said, this is posted November 5th, 2018. In quotes, it just has American Thinker. It doesn't say who the author is or who wrote this. It just puts it in here. In the 1960s, an informed but naive undergraduate, I was walking across the campus of the University of Pennsylvania with the chairman of the chemistry department, Professor Charles C. Price. He told me that he was president of the United World Federalists. This is back in 1960, people. And asked if I knew what that organization was. When I said that I did not, he replied that they believed in a one-world government that would grow out of the United Nations. I was nonplussed, as I had never heard anyone suggest that idea before. My opinion, I think that's what the United Nations is ultimately striving for, is one world government that they control. I'm going to go down here to this paragraph. I don't have the whole thing highlighted, but to get the context of the paragraph of what I have highlighted, I'm going to read the whole paragraph. The word rights appears in almost every sentence of the 1869 word. Let me start over because that didn't come out right. The word rights, as in unalienable rights, such as your freedom of speech is a right, your right to bear arms is a right. The word rights appears in almost every sentence of the 1,869 word UN document. The document is literally obsessed with rights, and one must assume they are likewise obsessed with the rights successes as manifested in the United Kingdom, the US, and France. However, there are some deviations from the rights usage we are all familiar with. In Article 3, instead of inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness found in our Declaration of Independence, the UN declares everyone's right to life, liberty, and security of person. Are they implying that security will bring happiness? Are they implying that happiness is to ephemeral, EPHEMERAL, a value unto Western? Perhaps more mundane survival goals are needed by most of the world. So they want to replace pursuit of happiness with security of persons, which we all know that they're going to say they're the only ones that can provide security. You got a section here that says we see a reprise of items from our Bill of Rights, condemnation of cruel and unusual punishment and due process, that the UN doesn't really include. In 2015, 70 years after the original rights-based document, the UN took a giant step towards the global government that was only hinted at in the first organizing document. They issued a document entitled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This document has 91 numbered sections of the UN's program for world government. Not sure what this means. I did not look it up, but the UDHR is only referenced once in the entire document in Article 19, unlike the original mother document that was under 1,900 words. This new document has 14,883 words. The 91 items are addressing issues under the 5 headings of people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Additionally, the document provides 17 sustainable development goals to improve life on the planet. You got another section that what is meant by the term sustainable. Goes into Marxist views. Sounded pretty liberal to me. Go down here to next section. The entire Transforming Our World document is cast in a stream of consensuous, of pious platitudes for a utopian future. People, we can't have a utopian future unless every single being on the planet has the same thoughts, agendas, and beliefs. It's not going to happen. It is an outsized utopian dream. 5 of the 17 items pertain to the environment. There are goals for the cities, for women, for the poor, and even for life under the water. Absolutely no sphere of human activity is exempt from control by the UN. The key word, of course, is no longer rights, except the bleak reference in Article 19. In fact, this writer did not see the word rights even once in this new document, even though the word appears in practically every sentence of the original UN document. The one-worlders of the 1950s and early 1960s are now in the UN driver's seat, and they have made their move. The overlay of Marxist talk about meeting needs has moved to center stage. The UN has assigned itself a time frame for moving forward in its plan for planetary homogeny. The sustainability ideal is not wedded to a Christian worldview. Instead, individual liberty is submerged in a scientifically determined collectivist mindset, with final decisions in the hands of the devilish, all-knowing Big Brother. My thoughts on all-knowing Big Brother. We all refer to Big Brother as a lot of times as the federal government. I don't think it's really as much our federal government as it is the UN controlling the federal government, or trying to control the federal government, having their feet in the federal government. The relevance of the individual is downplayed. It is being put forward by a UN that is no longer pro-Western, a much larger body that existed in 1945. Will you accept it? Or is it time, more than ever before, to begin rethinking our membership in that unsustainable body? This was published with permission from the American Thinker. I'm assuming that is a magazine or documents that I'm unaware of. But just some things I wanted to bring up. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this. I'll try to find more. Let me know if you want me to expand on what I found here. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, hit that bell. Until next time.